What's up, everybody? This is the start of my series on the Bill of Rights. Um, in this series, I'll be going through each of the amendments in the Bill of Rights. Going to discuss why they're so important, what's so great about them, you know, exactly what they mean, you know. Um, Some of them I'll give, like the court case that set the precedent for how they're used in law, examples of when it, they've been defended and upheld, examples of violations of them, uh, stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoy. So for this video, I'll be going through the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So let's get into it. So the First Amendment reads as follows. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So let's break that down. So, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. What does that mean? This means that no matter what, the government cannot tell you what to practice, what faith to practice. They can't institute a mandatory faith. You can be anything from a Christian to a Satanist, and as long as you're not breaking any laws, the government can't interfere. You know, you can't do anything crazy, any crazy cult stuff, obviously, because government's not going to take too kindly to that. But yeah, as long as you're obeying the law, you can do whatever you want. You know, you can practice whatever religion you please. So that's pretty straightforward. So the next part, or abridging the freedom of speech. The government can't make any rules or laws prohibiting people from saying what they want, barring things like lying under oath, inciting violence, etc. This particular part of the First Amendment is the most divisive, especially in modern times. Take, for instance, racism. Most first world countries, Canada, for example, have instituted laws that prohibit you from calling a black person the N-word. At face value, that sounds pretty good, you know. You can't walk up to anyone and say a racist thing to them. You know, that what could be so bad about that, you know? And this is what's so divisive, because it's not quite as good as it sounds. You know, there's a very valid argument to support the institution of such laws. But that's if it was the only aspect of it, you know. So let's think about the ramifications of what such a law would be. First, who would decide what's racist and what's not? You know, I think we can all agree the N-word, racist. Of course. Point blank, period, N-word, racist. But who gets to decide what else is racist? You know, how do we make sure that it's not going to be corrupted? You know, sorry, I'm very thirsty. So who decides it? You, me, the entire country, a diverse panel of racial studies majors. Okay. Who ultimately approves the list of racist things you can't say? So, if that panel of racial studies majors say, okay, these are the things you can't say, does that automatically go into law? Or, you know, does Congress do it? They're mostly white. Who says they'll be fair? You know, and who says the populace would be okay with that? Would be okay with, oh, all these white people, you know, they're approving a list of what's racist and what's not, and most of them are called bigots on a regular basis, anyways. So, and if the panel gets to approve the list, then anything can be put on that list. Who would elect the panel? How are you going to institute that? And what would be the punishment for using these, well, not just using racist terms, but doing racist things, you shouldn't get jail time, you know? Should you really have all your rights stripped away from you just for saying a word that's offensive and rude? I mean, don't get me wrong, if you call somebody the N-word, you're an asshole. And, if you get popped in the mouth for it, if that happens, that's on you. But should you get all your rights stripped away from you for it? You know? A fine? How much is the N-word worth? $500, $1,000, $100? What is it? That's too extreme in my opinion. You can't flog people through the streets. So I mean, basically what I'm saying is there's not really any way to do that without violating the First Amendment. And that's why we're the only country that actually has freedom of speech written into its founding. In the founding document, First Amendment, freedom of speech, right there at the very beginning. And again, a lot of people would say, hey, being racist, that should be illegal. But there's no way to institute that without violating our rights. It sucks. Yes, I'm not advocating for racism in any way, but there's no way to do that, you know? And you've got so many hate speech laws, the hate speech laws, apologies. You got so many of them on the books now. It's ridiculous. You can't misgender someone without facing consequences. There's a guy in Canada. It was a racist joke, but it was a joke. He is an actual comedian who made a comedic joke, and he was literally put in jail for it. That's not okay. That's not okay. And you'll probably hear me say this a lot, but that's why America is the greatest country. And I will not apologize for that. So, and one of the reasons why the hate speech laws are so divisive, and a lot of people hate conservatives for using the slippery slope argument. But, we've seen time and time again, we say, okay, let's take transgenderism, for instance. We've seen time and time again, they'll say, okay, people should be able to use hormone blockers and hormone replacement therapy. And we're like, okay, but it's a short leap. It's a slippery slope from going from that to, say, advocating for kids getting hormone replacement therapy and puberty blockers and stuff like that. and then a lot of people on the left, they go, oh, that's just a ridiculous argument. That's ridiculous. You guys and your slippery slope arguments. And then lo and behold, that's exactly what they're trying to do. Is, they're advocating for young kids getting hormone replacement therapy and puberty blockers and stuff like that. And so the slippery slope arguments, they're not they're not as far-fetched as people on the left make them out to be. And you can make the slippery slope argument about a lot of things, and a lot of slippery slope arguments that we've made have come true. So, and that applies 10 times over for hate speech laws. It is an extremely dangerous route to take. So that's why it's so good and yet so divisive that this particular part of the First Amendment is a part of the First Amendment. Excuse me. So, moving on. Or of the press is the next part of the First Amendment. The media can say what they think, even if it's false or anti-America. Again, barring certain things like libel and slander, which coincidentally, they still seem to get away with. But I'll get into that later because I could probably take up a few videos on the media. This is another divisive one, especially since the existence of outlets like Facebook, Twitter, Google. And this is possibly the biggest First Amendment topic for the political landscape. Noam Chomsky said it best: "He who controls the media controls the minds of the public." That is a very, very true thing. Our culture is controlled by the media. The media influences everything. And that's quite scary when you actually think about it. There are countless examples, some of which I'll discuss in a later video, of the media and big tech companies showing extreme biases towards the left, even going as far as unjustly censoring conservatives, spreading lies, and tweaking their own terms of service to attack those they don't agree with. I'm sure a lot of you on YouTube will have heard of the, what was the name of it? The Adpocalypse. That was basically when YouTube told conservative political commentator and comedian Steven Crowder that although he did not violate their terms of service, they were going to demonetize him. And he's been demonetized for a good while now. Thankfully, he makes all of his money selling mugs, but he's good on the money part, but it's still a gross thing to do. And it's really bad. And it's in part led to a mob rule when it comes to freedom of speech in the media and on social networking sites. If the right person or the amount of people complain about something, the bigwigs take action, often to the detriment of conservatives, and sometimes even to their own political allies. You hear this a lot. The left likes eating itself, and it's very true. One of their own doesn't toe the party line perfectly, and just like that, that person's out. And sometimes those people aren't even really on their side. They just haven't taken a side, and then they say something that slightly leans to the side that they don't like, and they're just like, no, get out of here, you're gone. Gina Carano, I don't know if you've heard about her recently. She was an actress who played in The Mandalorian, which I've never seen. I have no interest in seeing. I like Star Wars. I didn't watch the new ones. Well, that's not true. I saw one of the new ones, thought it was garbage. Haven't seen any of the other ones. You're not going to change my mind. And I like Pedro Pascal as an actor, um, but I don't really have any interest in watching that show either. But anyways, yeah, she played in that. She was in Deadpool. She's also a former UFC fighter. Um, and she compared the censorship that's going on now to Nazi Germany. And they basically canceled her for it. You know, she was fired from The Mandalorian. She was fired from all kinds of stuff. I apologize. My roommate just went behind me. I don't know if y'all saw him crawling like a dog behind me so he could get outside. Anyways, but yeah, she made a comparison between censorship and what Nazi Germany was doing. You know, one of the first things they did was they came after speech. You know, they attacked people for the speech they were using, and she made a very valid point. Um, but it didn't toe the party line, and it wasn't even the fact that she made the comparison to Nazi Germany, because the left has been comparing Trump to Hitler since he started running for president. You know, um, so it's not even the comparison, which is what, of course, they tried to blame it on the comparison to Nazi Germany, but you know, if you do any research, even the slightest amount, you'll realize how bullshit that is. It's because she didn't even outright say it, but she hinted at one side of the political aisle being at fault for it. And it just happens to be the side that most of the media is on, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, they really don't mind eating whoever they want as long as it helps their political means. Um, there is a very popular and never-ending debate between political parties and even inside individual political parties as to what can be done about that. Especially when it comes to the social media platforms, you know, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all that. The more libertarian-minded either say can't really do anything about it, um, as these are privately owned companies, and to enact laws on them would be a violation of their First Amendment rights. Or they'll say that we just need to come up with alternatives. Um, I'm sure you guys can imagine that coming up with a good alternative to something like YouTube or Facebook is pretty damn difficult. It's pretty damn difficult to do, you know, especially because when you think about the fact that the people who make most of the money, that put the most money into these platforms, they're not exactly on the side of the political aisle that would want to uh, go against Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Um, they would just want to, again, toe that party line and hope for the best because they're getting what they want. So why should they care? You know, it's not them that's being attacked. They're fine as long as they keep pumping that money into these platforms and towing the party line and saying all the right words and attacking all the right people. They're safe. Um, and then there's people like Fox News' Tucker Carlson, for instance, who I love. I think he's a great mind. I really do. Um, but he thinks that because of the reach of these big tech companies and because of how important these companies are, that their social media platforms need to be regulated to prevent censorship and to prevent things like doxing and such. Um, and I will apologize in advance if I've misappropriated his stance at all, but I've done my research, I've done my due diligence, and I do believe that is his stance. I've heard him say a couple times about censoring, or not censoring, but coming up with anti-censorship laws and regulations and such. He does believe in some sort of government regulation of social media platforms. Excuse me. And I personally struggle with this topic. I think most people on the right side of the aisle do struggle with this topic. Um, and I agree with the points made by both sides of the argument. On one hand, you really can't violate the First Amendment, and on the other hand, at some point you do need to step in and say, hey, you guys can't keep doing this. You can't keep censoring them. You can't keep removing them off your platforms and not allowing them to have a voice. It's pretty sad when the former president of the United States of America, one of the most powerful people in the entire freaking world, gets banned from Twitter and YouTube, or Twitter and Facebook. And I'm pretty sure if you wanted to be on YouTube, they ban him there too. That's pretty bad. Um, but I could do an entire video on Donald Trump being banned off those platforms. And then, of course, you have the more authoritarian-minded, mostly the people on the left, who say that these companies need to do more censorship, which, of course, is absolute freaking bat crap crazy. And I'm not sure how this debate will be resolved. And all I can say is we need to tread carefully so we don't violate our freedoms. So, let's move on to the next part. Where the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Basically, you can protest whatever, and whenever you want, as long as it's peaceful. And maybe Antifa and Black Lives Matter and the right-wing nutjobs who rioted at the Capitol didn't quite hear me. Peacefully. Holding signs? Peaceful. Throwing things at people, cars, and windows? Not so peaceful. Marching in a park? Peaceful. Blocking a highway? Not peaceful, and in fact illegal. That's something that a lot of people don't even know. You cannot block a highway. That is a violation of the law. Threatening people? Not peaceful. Chanting? Peaceful, assuming it's not a call to violence. Trust me, I keep telling you guys about future videos I'm going to be making, but I will do an entire video on the rioting that's plaguing this country. And by the way, it is not racist to say that rioting is not protesting. There is a vast difference, and the thing that has been going on in this country that has been being called protesting, more often than not, it is rioting. Don't let the media fool you. Don't let the politicians fool you. It is freaking rioting, and it is illegal. So, to sum up, you can practice a religion of choice. You can say what you want. The media can say what they want. You can protest. You can petition the government to recommend changes and file complaints. However, there are forms of speech that are not protected, and we're going to discuss this. So the first one would be called incitement. So, in the Supreme Court case Brandenburg v. Ohio, it was decreed that speech that is directed to inciting imminent lawless action and is likely to produce such action is not protected speech. Thankfully, the bar is set pretty high for what is deemed incitement. First, there needs to be proof that the defendant intended to incite unlawful action. Then, the defendant's words have to be very likely to provoke or persuade unlawful action. So, for example, if I incite a riot with the express intent of inciting a riot, I've engaged in incitement. So, for instance, kind of tricky one that's been going on right now. Well, not right now, but back in February, the Capitol riots. The left wanted to excoriate Donald Trump for that, and in fact, they wanted to impeach him for it, for his words, because they wanted to basically get him for incitement. That was absolutely freaking ridiculous, though, and thankfully, they basically wasted everyone's time. That was pretty much all that came out of that, was a giant waste of time. So the next one would be called True Threats in Virginia versus Black in 2003. The Supreme Court defined true threats as those statements where the speaker means to communicate a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful action to a particular individual or group of individuals. Pretty obvious. I can't say I'm going to kill you even if I don't follow through. Pretty standard. So the next one would be obscenity. The Supreme Court in Miller v. California in 1973 outlawed a three-pronged standard that material must meet in order to be considered legally obscene. The first prong, whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appears to the prurient interest or an inordinate interest in sex. 2. Whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct. 3. Whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literacy, artistic, political, or scientific value. Now, this one is probably the most complicated one. Many justices, in fact, have had a hard time defining and prosecuting obscenity, as there can sometimes be a fine line between pornography and obscenity. There are obvious obscenities, of course, child pornography, for example. Basically, be careful what kind of porn you watch, be careful what you make. Just don't do anything illegal. All right, so the next one, defamation, sometimes referred to as libel and slander, is any false speech, written or spoken, that harms someone's reputation or causes damage to their business or employment, or causes the public to despise or be disrespectful to that person or group of persons. The person must, of course, be named or strongly hinted at. Another basic one, don't spread lies about a person that would cause them any kind of harm. I'm looking at you, media. So, let's look at some real-world examples of these violations in use. So the first one, incitement. A very recent example of incitement was committed by none other than Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Prior to the results of the Derek Chauvin trial, she stated that if Chauvin wasn't convicted of murder, that, quote, "We've got to stay on the street and we've got to get more active," Waters said. "We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know we mean business," end quote. In reference to Black Lives Matters and the other activists, based on the fact that Black Lives Matter had been rioting, lighting things on fire, assaulting people, destroying property, and even committing murder. And Water stated that if their demands weren't met, they would go bigger. It's pretty obvious that she was committing incitement. So, true threats. I don't really have any exact examples, but think about a time where you've been threatened. Even if that threat wasn't followed through on, that's a true threat. So, obscenity. Most examples of obscenities are unfortunately child porn, and I'm not discussing that on this channel. So, defamation would be the last one. There's many to choose from, but I'm going to go with what is probably the most vile example that I could think of. And it's a very, very tragic case. In 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was lynched after Carolyn Bryant accused him of sexual harassment. To my understanding of this, basically, him and his friends went into a store, African American, Emmett Till, and Carolyn Bryant, a white woman, was also in the store at the time. And according to Bryant, Emmett was basically catcalling her and said some slightly inappropriate things. And he was lynched for it. It was later found that Carolyn exaggerated her claims. Sadly, she was never punished. So, yeah, that's pretty bad, to say the least. And there's a lot more I can go into. I probably will at a later time. But before I go, I want to leave you all with this. This amendment and every other amendment was put in place because our founders believed that these are rights that God gave us, and that nobody, not even the founders themselves, had the right to take them away. Unfortunately, as of late, it would seem that these rights are being infringed upon more and more. Make no mistake about it, there are many in the halls of government who, unlike the founders, believe that they should control our rights and give them out to those who they deem deserving. And combined with tech giants like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and mainstream media, they are starting to enact their vision of a country in which the only people with a voice are those who toe the line. And if that's not cause for some serious conversation and some fear and some fighting back, not calling for violence, by the way, then it may be too late. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next video on the Second Amendment. Thank you for being here. Have a good day.